was that, evidently other presidents, just, never bothered going to Dover. They never consoled families. They didn't send letters or make phone calls. And he's going to get around to it. Trust him. He's going to do it. Now, understand, when those caskets came back, where was our where was the Marmalade Mussolini? He was hitting a little white ball. And, he was winning, though. He was winning. And there was golf. And he turns around and he said, those other presidents, they didn't do any of that stuff. They didn't make calls. When, yeah, they did. And there's a lot of evidence to that. And again, you come back to this alternative reality world to where he says, whatever he wants and, creates all this fake news while simultaneously, again, saying that reporting his actual words is somehow fake news. For instance, he went on about the Russian investigation. No collusion. There's nothing there, nothing going on. It's over. It's been established that there was nothing. It's been established. It's well established. Nothing there. Yet there's an investigation going on right now, and a good number of his campaign and cabinet people have already been interviewed and are being interviewed. But there's nothing to see. Move along. And you just kind of go down to this, this bizarre world again. Obamacare is dead, evidently. He came out and said, it's dead. It's all gone. Don't worry about it. You don't even talk about it anymore. It's dead. We've killed it. And, claiming that, right now, already we've got enough votes. We could pass we could fix the healthcare thing. We could do it just, if we wanted to. We've already got the votes right now. And you go, really? Is this where we are? And, all of this stuff is, stuff that we know is not true. But again, throwing it out there. Now, there were some really great one-liners that came out of this presser that you just go, one of my favorite ones being Obamacare is finished. It's dead. It's gone. It's no longer. You shouldn't even mention it. It's gone. There's no such thing as Obamacare anymore. Yet, legally, the law of the land still is. Just because he put pen to paper and signed his name on an executive order does not overturn the law. Now, he may do everything in his power to kill, to cause crisis, to make it more difficult to sign up, but it's still, until the Republicans figure out how to get out of their own way, it's still the law of the land. Of which, again, you go back to his statement during the press conference, on what's going on in the Senate. And he said, quote, I'm not going to blame myself. I'll be honest. They're not getting the job done. While standing next to the head of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, who, again, Steve Bannon is putting all of his energy into getting rid of. And look, now understand, remember, Mitch and Donald, they're buddies now. Never closer. They're buddies, never been closer. And yet, while standing next to Mitch, they're asked about, Bannon's war on the Republican establishment. And Trump goes on, Steve is a friend of mine. I can understand where Steve Bannon is coming from. I know how he feels. There are some Republicans, frankly, that should be ashamed of themselves while standing next to the leader of the Senate. Just kind of, again, one of those things that maybe just a thought, maybe he kind of missed the moment. And again, all of this stuff really comes back to, and if you watched any of these press conferences, I mean, it's nothing new, and we know this. I have to keep throwing it out there that this is not normal. What we see coming out of this administration, what we see coming out of the person currently occupying the Oval Office at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is not normal. This behavior, not normal. This obsession with can't get over the election. And there's part of me that thinks he's just so shocked that he won that it's, he got to keep bringing it up to kind of remind him, like pinch me, I need to be reminded. and of course couldn't let Hillary go. Someone asked the question if Hillary was running, and he said, I hope Hillary runs. Is she going to run? I hope Hillary runs. Please run. And you go, at some point, the office is a little bit above, this kind of schoolyard bullying, this kind of, playing the mama's game. Just a little thought. You're now above that. You're the guy. You are the president. You shouldn't be down in the muck. This kind of stuff should be beneath the office. But sadly, we've got a guy who, well, to be honest, he's in the muck. As my grandmother always said to me when I would do something stupid, I grew up in a housing project, and she used to say, you can take the ghetto, you can take you out of the ghetto, but you can't seem to take the ghetto out of you. When you do dumb things, this is kind of it. This is who he is. And as the quote we said yesterday from Michelle Obama, the White House doesn't change you. It just magnifies who you are. And we see exactly who he is. Going to take a quick break. When we come back and talk about the big executive order, what it's going to mean for the Affordable Care Act is nobody I've talked to who saw yesterday's display can come away with anything but concern. And, the reality being, the more we see this stuff go on right in front of us, the more dangerous it becomes. Because, so many people that I've talked to recently have kind of expressed this fatigue, this kind of, it's too much already. There's too much going on. There's too much for me to handle. And I've seen people and I've talked to people who, have just kind of, I'm pulling away. I'm dropping out. I'm done for now. I need a break. This is really not where I want to be. And we can't allow that to happen, because the attacks that we've seen, the stuff that we've seen go on, is going to continue. Look, the hope is that we do get tired. The hope is that we do get complacent. The hope is that we do say, you know what, I can't take it anymore. I'm going to drop out of this. It just is what it is. Quick break. Right back.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous. The salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Here's the simplest thing. Figure out an affordable rate and let people use that, something that won't undermine your quality of life, won't interfere with your ability to make expenses, won't interfere with your ability to save money for your kids' college education, and let people buy in to Medicare or Medicaid.
I got a working class blues. I work all day to take all my class. I got a working
So where was he? Where was he when we were, going through almost a year-long discussion about the Affordable Care Act? And again, I go back to that. To me, is the ultimate place where I want to be. That simple. But anyway, as we've been talking about the most recent Kaiser Family Foundation health tracking poll, they say 71% of us want Congress to do whatever they can do to make the Affordable Care Act or dreaded Obamacare work. Just 21% want Congress to do whatever they can to make it fail. And I would argue one of the things that will make it fail is what the president has put on the dotted line, and this idea that we're going to starve the subsidies. And I look here in Pennsylvania where evidently before the executive order, the state had assumed there was going to be a little over 8% increase in the marketplace health plans. Now this is, according to reports, now they're saying that the average could skyrocket 30.6%. And here to talk about this most recent announcement, I've asked Antoinette Krause to come talk with us. She's the executive director of the Pennsylvania Health Access Network. Antoinette, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks. Always glad to be on.
So am I getting this right? The state had assumed that next year people who are getting their insurance from the marketplace, they would see their rates go up a little over 8%. And now because of the uncertainty created by this administration, they're saying it's going to be upwards of 30.6% higher. Am I getting this right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yesterday they came out with finalized rates, and it is a direct result of President Trump's actions of pulling the cost-sharing subsidies.
So what are these cost-sharing subsidies? These aren't the subsidies that individuals get for when they get their premiums, and there's that sharing. It isn't that, is it?
Yeah, no. So there's tax credits which help reduce premiums, but what the Affordable Care Act said is, if you make, $30,000 or less, we're going to give you additional help for lower out-of-pocket costs. So it lowers the cost to go to the doctor. It lowers your out-of-pocket expenses. It lowers your deductible. And we heard President Trump say, this is a bailout to the insurance companies, and that's blatantly false. These are bailouts to hardworking families. They're not even bailouts, right? They're subsidies to hardworking families to make sure they can afford health care and get all of the treatment they need to stay healthy and stay well.
But at the end of the day, what I give him credit for is that he is able to pick these things that people don't like. Like, no, who likes insurance companies? And target his rhetoric to someone that universally people go, no, I don't like insurance companies. So it's an easy target to go after them, while actually what they're doing is they're attacking us. They're attacking people.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the timing of this is after insurance companies had to sign on the dotted line. And, Pennsylvania did the right thing by requesting, 2 sets of rates. So Pennsylvania was prepared, but in other states it could mean insurance companies are going to leave the market and folks won't have any options for affordable health care coverage. So it's blatant sabotage, the timing. The goal is to make sure folks don't enroll in the upcoming open enrollment period. Now,
we've heard rumors that this administration is not going to do anything to promote people to enroll, to let people know. I mean, you had the president yesterday come out and say onto it, it's dead. Obamacare's gone. Don't even talk about it. Don't even bring it up. It's done. It's dead. It's dead. It's gone. It's over.
Yeah, and I think our job is that that's not true. The Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it, is still the law of the land. There's still the tax credits to make plans affordable. Nothing has changed. The Trump administration has actually taken action to make sure no one will know. They slashed the marketing and advertisement budget by 90%. They cut in-person assistance by 43%. So you're not going to see a lot of, TV advertisements or warnings that the open enrollment period's coming. And, not only did they do that, they also cut open enrollment period in half. So it is now November 1st to December 15th. Everyone needs to write that on their calendar. Folks are used to having double the time, but no, this year, November 1st to December 15th.
Wow. And now what happens if, let's say you're currently on it. You're currently getting your insurance through the ACA. Do you have to go through and re-enroll, or are you automatically enrolled for the coming year?
Yeah, so you can be re-enrolled, but we encourage everyone to go back. There's new plans and prices, and you really want to check to make sure nothing's changed in your life. Did you get a bonus? Did you lose your job? All of those things factor into the amount of your financial assistance that you'll get. So we encourage everyone to go back, shop, make sure your information is accurate so you get the best plan that meets your family's needs.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting though that they do it in November when they're talking about it, being part of your health, your tax returns when you don't do your taxes till April. So it's kind of a weird kind of setup to begin with, I think.
Yeah, it's confusing for folks because it's based on your taxable income. So we always encourage folks to, think about what your life will look like. And for a lot of folks, that's hard to predict. So, we always encourage folks to go back, update your information if something changes over the course of the year. So you don't end up owing money back on your taxes, or, maybe you're not getting as much financial assistance as you're eligible for.
Now, let me ask you the other side of this. I've read some stories that had said that's saying that, honestly, that this is actually really, really short-sighted, because while they're taking the subsidies or bailout or whatever words you're going to use from the insurance companies, what it's actually doing is you're shifting the costs on the higher premiums, which then mean higher payments and subsidies to the individuals, which eventually go back to the insurance companies, which in the long run is going to cost us as taxpayers and as a country about $200 billion more over the long haul.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And this is why, we view this as really an attempt to undermine the marketplace and, sabotage hardworking families and, what they need to stay healthy and stay well. But I think the most important thing, and you pointed this out, is the reason why rates are going up is because insurance companies are going to have to continue to offer these cost-sharing subsidies. So, folks really aren't going to see a difference, except in the fact that to make up the difference, to make sure they could still offer this, they have to, or drop out of the market. Everyone's tax credits will increase to offset the rate increases, and in turn, that will go back to the federal government. So, it really creates, a very big problem for Pennsylvania consumers and for taxpayers in the long run.
And the marketplace as a whole, because look, I think you were spot on that this is about getting insurers to pull out. This is about creating crisis and all of that, because look, across the country, the very real problems are in a lot of places there are only one insurer. There's one insurer, or there may not be any. And this is where I go back to the beginning when all of this started and said at the minimum we needed to have a public option to be able to make sure that those holes were filled, that there wouldn't be no one in a marketplace.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I think we all agree the ACA is not perfect, but we should be working to strengthen it. And this act by the Trump administration, Pennsylvania put in effort, had foresight to work with insurance companies to say, well, if this happens, how can we be ready? A lot of states that didn't happen, so insurance companies are going to say, we can't make up the difference. The only option for us is to leave the market, and then some folks might be left with no option.
Yeah, and again, it comes back to creating that crisis, that uncertainty. I do want to go back for a second, for our listeners who are in Pennsylvania or in states that do this well, because highlight the fact that, as you said, they have cut the enrollment period in half, which again sends to me a very clear message that they're going to do whatever they can do, however they can destroy it, however they can harm it. They're going to do it. So I just want to make sure that people get that they have to go through this. How do you go through this enrollment process if you've never done it?
Yeah, I mean, so we would really encourage folks, again, I want to remind folks, open enrollment November 1st to December 15th. Financial assistance, tax credits are still available. These big rate increases, most folks are going to see that increase in their tax credit, so they're not going to, feel the difference. The process can be confusing. If you don't know how this is going to impact you, there are still navigators across Pennsylvania. We have navigators. We can hook you up with some of our partners that have navigators in regions we don't serve, and you can simply call or text our helpline. The number is 877-570-3642. And we can help folks figure out what this means for them.
Can you give me that number again?
Yep, 877-570-3642. You can call, or easier yet, just text HELP, and we'll get back to you.
All right, we'll make sure that we get that on the website, and we'll tweet it out to make sure that folks have that information. Because look, I mean, at some point we're going to have to do this ourselves if our government isn't going to help us do it. Let me ask you the other side of this, because you guys are with the Pennsylvania Health Access Network. You guys are, you've got, financial concerns as well. And I'm sure that there isn't money flowing in from the federal government to help you stay afloat, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, so we also rely on independent donors, private foundations, and, we really double down on our efforts. We're asking folks to volunteer, to help us staff the phones, to make sure that, we help every single person necessary. We're running, kind of a GOTV campaign. We're going to call our list of folks and make sure they're enrolling. I think the state has really come together, partners, advocates, funders, to figure out, what can we do to make sure people enroll? Because, look, it's become very clear. President Trump doesn't want you to enroll, so we want to make sure that everyone enrolls to say, people really depend on this. You can't sabotage it. We're going to make it work in Pennsylvania.
There you go. There's an interesting way of thinking about it. You want to stick it to Donald? Sign up.
Enroll in health insurance. Yes.
There you go. Despite him. Antoinette, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks.
Great talk with you. Antoinette Krause, Executive Director there at the Pennsylvania Health Access Network. If you want to check out their stuff, we'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com of how you can take a look at the work that they do, and fantastic stuff. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
With corporations socking away massive profits, and with the labor market fairly tight, why are workers' wages still stuck at miserly and even poverty levels?
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Again, you got to kind of wonder what's, what the sabotage is. I think that's what it is. I think it's purely just the sabotage. Honestly, I think the Trump administration has sent the NSA to hack into our computers and say no audio for you today. Gonna be a fun day of no computers actually working. Anyway, but you think about what's going on. And this is one of those days where you just kind of look at what came out of this administration over the last several days. And you look at the kind of crazy that we've seen. It's not surprising that more Americans are thinking that we're on the wrong track. In fact, 53% in August said, hey, things are going well. We're on the kind of right track. Things are going well. It's down to 46%. And I'm like of the mindset, you go, really? That's still that high? There are still people who go, yeah, this is what we want. This is good. This is good. Happy. Now, the president's got an approval rating of 37%, which is actually holding steady. So you go, I guess a little over a third of us are crazy. I mean, that's what I walk away with. A little bit over a third of us are going, yeah. The guy's doing a great job. Now, just 32% of the folks polled think Trump is dealing with the Republicans in Congress in a A-OK positive way. Again, I'm looking at, I'm thrilled with the way he's dealing with Congress. Because if they actually had their stuff together, if they had their act together, maybe possibly things would be worse. And that's one of the things where you go, could it get any worse? I mean, honestly, could things get worse? Sure, they could. It could be true that Mitch and Donald Trump are buddy. It could be that they're getting on the same page. To me, that's a scarier prospect than them eating each other. Just kind of a thought. And the more I look at the press conference yesterday, the more I go back to the hope is that they are just plain crazy, and they are fighting and eating each other. At least that's my hope, because that at least tells us that there's some hope for the rest of us. Now, you may have been paying attention yesterday. The big story yesterday was that Tom Marino, the congressman for Pennsylvania, and what is it with Pennsylvania right now? What is it with our congressman? Is it the gerrymandering that gets us the worst possible people to sit in those offices? I mean, you just had Murphy here not too long ago out in Western Pennsylvania with the I'm staunchly pro life, no abortions for you except for my mistress. My mistress, go get an abortion quick. Don't want anybody to know I'm a hypocrite. And he's moving on, and that's a good thing. Finally, goodbye. But it's still a crazy district, and you wonder how much worse it'll get there. Fortunately, there's a good guy running. A friend of mine, Mike Crossy, is running for that seat. Let's hope. Let's hope some sanity comes there. But I look at the report yesterday, which was about Tom Marino, the Republican representative up in the north central part of Pennsylvania, Scranton area up that way. And he was going to be the drug czar. Trump had tapped him to be, the head of the DEA. He was going to be the guy to crack down on those drug people. And, of course, the drug people, as we know, are pharmaceutical companies and really good-looking women with rolling cases behind them. If you've ever gone to a doctor's office, the drug salespeople are just the most attractive women you're ever going to see because, they're selling drugs. And I don't know. I'm not sure why, but it just is what it is. So what happened, evidently, is the guy who was going to be drug czar evidently pushed some legislation through that would make it harder, for us to, hold drug companies accountable. Just a little something. Make it almost impossible for people to go after, the makers of these addictive drugs that we keep being, funneled upon us. And it made it kind of a big story. In fact, such a big story that Joe Manchin in West Virginia said that over his dead body would Marino be drug czar. You go, wow, that's pretty harsh. Over your dead body, Joe? Can you think of some other things maybe you might want to throw that into? I don't know. Maybe some stuff that Trump's been doing. Just kind of a thought. I know. Re-election, got to save a Democrat in West Virginia. I get it. But this morning we find out that Marino has, evidently been withdrawn from consideration. Now not going to be the drug overlord. And, it's one of these moments where I look at it and I go, okay, well, Marino's not a great guy. I'm not overly thrilled with him. But who are you going to put into it? Who's next? I look at Andy Puzder, who was going to be the head of the Department of Labor, who was a horrible choice. The guy that, eventually got into the position, no better. There wasn't we're going to stop this horrible person and we're going to get somebody. No, he's got somebody else who's equally horrible. So I look at this and I go, okay, well, no Marino. Sorry, none for you. But who will be next? Now, what's interesting is you look at someone like Marsha Blackburn, who's been, caught up in this same scandal because evidently she was doing some of the same thing because, she's now running for Senate to replace Corker. And this is now being one of those, because she was actually the lead sponsor on Marino's bill. That would make it, look, Republicans, lobbyists, drug money lobbyists, there's a cozy, incestuous kind of pool there. So, it is what it is. Evidently, she's caught up in the middle of this now, and it's kind of harming her because look, Tennessee, like Pennsylvania, and I would argue like a lot of rural areas, heavily tied up in the opioid addiction crisis. And again, I can't not say this. It's interesting to me that now it's an opioid addiction crisis when it's hit rural America. When it was just a bunch of junkies in the inner cities, they were just junkies and got what they deserved. But now that it's hit, white suburbia, Now that it's hit white rural America, it's now an opioid crisis, and it's something that we've got to go after. And look, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. It's just interesting to me on the dynamics. That's all. Because look, I remember as a kid, and this, one of those things that sticks with you. In fact, something I've told my kids. The reason I've never actually done drugs at all, except alcohol, it's a drug, yeah, but I never did any illegal drugs. Let's go that way. And I don't even take painkillers when I have surgery or have had surgery in the past, and just because I'm so afraid of this stuff. I remember as a kid, I was probably 8 or 9 years old. There was a guy in a big, heavy green army coat. And I remember seeing those all over when I was a kid. But he was, up against the side of the house, the neighbor's house, between two bushes, dead with a needle in his arm. And I remember it like it was yesterday. It was one of these things that just burned onto my mind. And I remember that, that heavy green overcoat, kind of over him. And this was in the summertime. I mean, this guy used to walk around in July with that giant army coat on, just tweaking out. And I remember my mother going, you know what? If you ever take drugs, I will kill you myself. You don't have to worry about the drugs to do it. I will take you out. And I remember that scene, and every time through my life where someone has said, hey, you want to try this? Or hey, you want to try that? No. And it's not because, look, I'm a wonderful human being or anything. It's because, I know myself. I would be the best drug addict ever. I would be so good at it, I'd probably be that guy dead on the side of the neighbor's house. And you go, well, why? Why are you bringing that up? Well, you go back to the 1970s when this stuff happened. When those guys came back from Vietnam with these horrible drug problems, did we have an opioid crisis back then? No, they were just druggies. We didn't have a problem. My hope is that by having this focus on this opioid addiction crisis, that we start looking at drugs a little bit differently. And we spend a little bit more time on treatment and then maybe on getting people to not do it, and maybe giving people hope and opportunity so that they don't go, this is my only outlet. Maybe that should be a way to go. Instead of crime and punishment, instead of locking people up, instead of, ruining people's lives by giving them criminal records because, hey, they got a little pot in their hands. Maybe just maybe, and maybe it's just me. But maybe, a different way of thinking about it, instead of being a criminal thing, being a healthcare thing. Just a thought. And maybe now that it's hit white suburban America, it will become that. Maybe. We shall see. Anyway, going to take a quick break. Let's hope the computers work. I'm right back with Talk Media News. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk, except when the computers don't work. So I guess we're just going to run right through this because evidently the computers are not liking me today. And I'm not going to go through a whole day of not having the computer work. Evidently, the Scaramucci. Let's move on to the Mooch. Remember Mooch? He was famous for about 10 seconds. Was somebody for a moment or two, and then gone. Gave up his business, gave up his marriage, gave up, seeing his kids be born, gave up, all of that stuff so that he could be the communications director at the White House, and was there like 6 minutes. I don't even think he got his full 15, didn't even get the full 15 minutes, got like 6. And, then hastily pushed out the door and dumped. And you go, that's nice. That's cute. Out the door with you, Mooch. Well, evidently, the Mooch has started the Scaramucci Post, which I didn't know. I didn't know he was starting his own kind of online little thing where, people were supposedly, watching his stuff, supposedly, paying attention. Evidently, the Mooch, through Mooch Post or Scaramucci Post, did a poll yesterday that has offended a number of people that, again, When did you think this was a good idea? What went on between the ears? What is it that made you go, you know what? I think it's going to be a good idea to put up a poll and ask people how many Jews died during the Holocaust. In fact, the official wording was how many Jews were killed in the Holocaust? Less than 1 million, between 1 and 2 million, between 2 and 3 million, more than 5 million. Of course, the answer is more than 5 million. And the more than 5 million would have been the choice. Problem is everyone's going, what exactly were you trying to get out of this poll? And it got people going, what are you thinking? Now, what my thought process is the mooch was just trying to get a little attention, stir up a little controversy, get people a little, wadded up in the panties, little fired up. To know that Scaramucci post is actually a thing, I did not know. And thanks to this, which they've now taken the poll down, but now thanks to this, I now know, and equally do not care that it exists, but I now know. I got to think, though, this is part of the Trumpian idea of, hey, no publicity is bad publicity. We evidently know everything we need to know. Any publicity is good, I guess, in their world, even if it's horrible, even if it's, hey, let's grab her by the you-know-what, or, hey, how many Jews were killed in the Holocaust? It's just amazing stuff. Anyway, let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Mike Olesker, Talk Media News. Michael, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, good to talk to you. I know it didn't surprise you yesterday when Donald Trump was talking about Congress and said they're not getting anything done. Yeah. I'm not going to blame myself.
No, of course not. We can't possibly.
Go figure. He would have said, we're a long way from Harry Truman and the buck stops here.
Boy, aren't we? I mean, but here's the thing, and I'm not gonna beat him up too much for that, because I tell my kids that all the time. It's not my fault. Nothing can be my fault. It's got to be yours.
Well, it was an interesting press conference he held yesterday. He answered questions for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and some of his answers were even true. Others were not. He said the Republican Party is very, very unified. He said this at a time when his former aide, Steve Bannon, is threatening overtly and as publicly as he can to tear apart the Republican Party, the Republican establishment. He stood there, Donald Trump, next to Mitch McConnell at a time when Bannon himself is openly lobbying to replace McConnell as Senate leader, has said, I'm going to cut off your oxygen, has threatened to destroy him politically, and Donald Trump stood there and said, well, Steve Bannon is a good friend of mine. I like him a lot. And McConnell is standing there like a potted plant. And, they, of course, Trump and McConnell have been fighting for months over health care not getting passed. But the most jarring thing yesterday, the thing that veered most from actual truth, was when Trump accused Barack Obama and other presidents of not making consoling phone calls to the families of soldiers killed in battle. That's patently untrue. We know for certain that Obama and George W. Bush, for that matter, and other presidents, not only phoned those grieving families, but sometimes went to Dover Air Force Base when the bodies came home, often made unpublicized visits to the wounded at Walter Reed Army Hospital. And when he was challenged on this, Trump came completely undone and said, well, gee, somebody told him that Obama and the others didn't make those calls. I wonder what his chief of staff, General John Kelly, who lost a son in combat, I wonder what he thought when he heard Trump say such a thing. The problem is, unless he's challenged, he finds it just fine to make these outlandish statements, which then become part of the political narrative, whether they're true or not.
Yeah.
No, I mean, over and over.
Yeah, there were tons of them yesterday, though. I mean, it just wasn't that one. I mean, there was just so much from that press conference that you go, what alternative world are you living in? What rabbit hole have you fallen down? I mean, one of the things that jumped out at me was, he was talking about is, we've gotten all these justices, we've got all these court appointments, historic numbers of judges we're getting through, while simultaneously saying, well, the Democrats are obstructing like never before. And I'm going, you can't have it both ways.
Well, and he's also talking about, paying proper respects to the fallen military at a time when we lost these 4 soldiers in Niger.
Yeah, he was golfing, though. Golfing's more important.
He was golfing when one of them was brought home. But not only that, he waited 12 days, didn't say anything in public, didn't make any of those calls. When asked about it yesterday, he said, we're sending out letters tonight. Does that not sound like, hey, the check is in the mail? It just sounds like such baloney.
Yeah, but in his defense, Michael, it wasn't on Fox News.
Yeah, that's true. If it's not there, then he's oblivious to it.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta know where he gets his information. Now, you got to get that, because if it's not right there on whatever it is he watches first thing in the morning that sends him into the Twitter fits, it is what it is. What did you think of Greg Popovich's comments?
Tell me what that was again.
He said, quote, "This is a man in the Oval Office who is a soulless coward who thinks he can only become large by belittling others. This is, of course, been a common practice of his. But to do this in this manner, to lie about how previous presidents responded to the deaths of soldiers, is as low as it gets. We have a pathological liar in the White House, unfit intellectually, emotionally, and psychologically to hold this office, and the whole world knows it, especially those around him every day."
Well, he's echoing remarks that you and I have made in our respective brilliance. So, I'm not surprised to hear it. We've been saying this for months. Not that it takes a genius to figure this out, but in terms of the truth, Washington Post has listed more than 1,100 times that he has failed to tell the truth. So, and the soulless remarks that he's made, for example, about Puerto Rico are just awful. We've talked also in the last couple of weeks about Bob Corker, the senator from Tennessee, who, having announced that he's not going to run for re-election, has found his voice, has found his courage, and has been saying things in public that many Republicans have been whispering in private for some time. And, you wonder, well, why are they so afraid to take him on? There is a new poll just came out today that may have some of the answer to that. Republican voters were asked, who do you trust more to handle issues, Donald Trump or Congress?
Right.
And by a vote of 63 to 29, they said Trump.
Yeah, well, Congress has got approval ratings right there somewhere near herpes. So, I mean,
right.
To me, that's not surprising.
Even with all that has gone on, he still holds on to that hardcore Republican base.
Yeah, well, I mean, but here's the thing. I've had these conversations, for years now, because this isn't a new dynamic. My congressman is good. I love my guy, but the rest of them are horrible, especially those liberal ones. Don't trust them. And, the institution has been so bastardized over the years that, it's not surprising to me that even as insane as Trump is, and I don't know, even if he was being impeached, I don't know that people would trust Congress more than someone who is being impeached.
Well, the word impeachment has been tossed around, but as long as they control both houses of Congress, barring some sort of bombshells that Mueller, the special prosecutor, might tell us about, it's very much a long shot.
No, the only way he gets impeached is if the rats think that they're going to drown too.
Well, unless the base of power is turned over in elections in 2018.
Which is another thing that I've seen. There was an interesting article yesterday, I think it was in the Times, that said, how's he going to handle it if the Democrats do take the House? Because I guess Paul Ryan was telling the big donors at Jackson Hole that, hey, if you don't give us money and we can't defend the House is going to go after him. And we don't know what Trump will do if he actually has to deal with real opposition.
Yeah, he is a fighter. I'll give him that much, but he fights over needless things, and he has yet to make a graceful move on anything. There's a story breaking just within the last hour that Tom Marino, his
I was going to ask you about
nominee
that.
to be drugs, he's now had to withdraw.
Yeah.
The story that came out over the weekend, Washington Post and 60 Minutes combining, that he championed the bill that made it tough for the drug agents to crack down on some of these opioid shipments. Imagine the lack of vetting that went into just throwing his name out there. Imagine if he had somehow gotten through and become the drug czar, and this stuff had then come out. Imagine how the families of people who have become opioid addicts would have felt when all of this information came out about Marino. But it's just one more example of how this administration fails to do its job on the routine stuff day after day.
No, I'm with you. But it's. I talked about this earlier. I mean, it's interesting to me that now we have an opioid crisis, that it's hit rural America and it's hit white suburbs. Before, when it was just a bunch of junkies in the inner city.
Well, let's be honest about this. We've had a so-called war on drugs for 50 years.
And it's working really well.
Oh, yeah.
It's providing lots of profits for private prison companies and law enforcement in our lives like never before. It is working as planned, I would argue.
Oh, yeah. Well, for a lot of years they just ignored it and on Capitol Hill and just whispered to each other, hey, it's just the blacks, or hey, it's the blacks and the Latinos. Who cares about them? They want to destroy themselves. Go ahead. As disgraceful as that was, it was also untrue. And more, it has spread across the country to every imaginable racial, religious, cultural, economic group. And now the opioid crisis is completely out of control. I had lunch not long ago with an old friend of mine who is a major medical figure in Washington, a doctor who said to me, Mike, this opioid stuff is worse than we've been told. So for them to try to launch a guy like Tom Marino as the drug czar, they are completely out of touch.
Yeah, but again, not surprising in that, look, this is how the Trump administration's worked on every front, with a lot of people that they've thrown out there. And you go, look, I'm not surprised by anything this administration does. But again, not a good week for Pennsylvania. I mean, you got two congressmen, who, one of them's not, one of them's going to be out because, hey, mistress, have an abortion, even though I'm anti-abortion.
The hypocrisy is staggering. I want to say one other thing to get back to these soldiers. These 4 soldiers who were killed the other day in Niger. What are they doing there? We know that we have troops in Afghanistan. We had them in Iraq. We've got them all over the world. We're worried about nuclear war with North Korea. Why were these troops there? Are we starting something up in one more place? How many wars do we want to fight at a time? Most people can't even pronounce the country in West Africa, much less know what is going on there, that we lost 4 American soldiers over there.
Yeah,
Just how thin do we stretch ourselves?
That's a good question. I mean, we've really become the imperialists. But I was told that we're building a big drone base over there, and I don't know that to be absolute true, but that's what someone had told me. We're building this giant base for drones.
I don't know, but all of this saber rattling all over the world. And this guy's in charge, and it's an anxious time.
Scary and interesting times. Michael, I appreciate the time, man.
All right, man. Take care.
Thanks so much. Always great talking with you, Michael Lesker, Talk Media News. And look, at the end of this, it's one of those things that, at some point we've got to figure out, how we end up in this situation. Just scary, scary stuff. And thanks, Mike, for the time. Look. and evidently our computers are completely down, so there are going to be no breaks. Yay! But again, I look at this as one of those moments where, with these soldiers, it's just, well, to have the president come out and say that no one's done this before. To have the president come out and say that Obama didn't do it, even though we've seen all these photos that say that that Bush did, and to Bush's credit, they did. He was there. Now you can argue that the Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld used to use the auto pen to sign the letters that went out to folks. You kind of got to wonder about that, but it just is. It is what it is. It's most certainly scary times, because I remember when I was a kid, going back to when I was a kid, the fact that when those guys came back from Vietnam, and this is one of those things that that has always concerned me, has always worried me, is that every time we put soldiers into harm's way, we put them on pedestals, we have all kinds of photo ops, we do all of this stuff, only to bring them back and to just ignore their problems and just ignore where things have gone. I mean, it's really, and I go back to, when I was a kid, you saw these guys who were just dumped, completely dumped in our society. And it's horrible, just horrible stuff. Anyway, interesting news coming out of Alabama. Evidently, and this is one of those weird kind of things that, look, I'm not a huge fan of Roy Moore. I always find it interesting that those who are the most pious, the ones who put themselves up on the platform, the ones who are always pimping the gotta have the rules plastered everywhere, of which Roy Moore is one of those. Interesting, quick little tidbit with Moore. I remember I was interviewing a guy, Pastor James David Manning, of the Ottawa World Baptist Church in New York City. Really an entertaining guy, funny as all can be, crazy as a loon, but funny. I was interviewing him right around the time the Roy Moore thing was going on with the Ten Commandments, and I asked the good pastor, I said, I have this theory, and I want to test it out. Can you give me the Ten Commandments? And he said, I got the good book right here. And he said, I'll flip right to the page and I'll read you and I go, no. That's not what I want. I want you to tell me. Use your own words. Use big boy words. Tell me what the Ten Commandments are. As a pastor, you should be able to tell me what number 6 is. You should be able to, without even thinking. Number 3 is bang. You should be able to do that. And he kept going back to, I'm going to read it to you. And I kept, no, that's not what I want. I want people to understand that the folks who want them plastered everywhere, people like Moore, I would argue, don't actually know them. And they need the constant reminder to be decent human beings. I'm kind of okay with you if you want to plaster it on your arm or something. Good for you. But there was no way he was going to be able to tell me what the Ten Commandments were in his own words. And again, I look back to Moore and all of this kind of shady dealings. And now we find out his Twitter account, and this isn't a huge deal, but we find out that overnight his Twitter account doubles. And, well, they're mostly Russian bots. How did that happen? Here to help us work through some of that, I've asked our good friend Andrea Chalupa to come talk with us. Andrea, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, how are you, Rick?
I'm good. I'm looking at this Twitter thing. How is it that, overnight Roy Moore goes from, I don't know, like 12 or 13,000 up to 25,000 followers just like, in the snap of a finger?
Well, the Kremlin has chosen its candidate in Alabama.
That was simple. So it couldn't have been he just decided I'm going to pump up my numbers and go on one of those websites and pay $100 to get 100,000 followers.
No, I mean it's clear. Obviously, these bots, and this is all happening out in the open, just like much of Russia's interference during the 26th election happened out in the open right before our eyes. most Americans, including the vast majority of the mainstream media, just wasn't knowledgeable enough of Russia, Ukraine, matters over there to really put the pieces together and look at that as anything more than a conspiracy theory about Russian spy novel at the time. But, just like in 2016, it's happening right before our eyes, and it's happening again, and we're seeing it play out in the Senate race in Alabama. And one of the major giveaways, just like last year, is that a lot of these bot accounts just look very, very Russian. You have really awful Google Translate bios on these accounts, like horrible broken English, basically, describing who these people are. Some of the accounts of these Russian bots say things like, I wait for birth of my child, or I work in hammering beats, like really weird stuff, like just weird, sloppy Google translations from Russian. And some of them have like, I love Russia, Russia strong, U.S. Russia. So it's really, really crazy to watch. And what's also very important to point out is that Roy Moore's opponent in the Senate race in Alabama, Doug Jones, he has been benefiting from a surge in grassroots support. You have a ton of activists with large Twitter followings really pushing his Twitter account and getting people to follow him. And you have a more national awareness into this race.
Right.
Because Roy Moore is just so absolutely terrifying. He's like Steve Bannon and Sebastian Gorka's love child. So you have then Doug Jones, his profile being raised. So, of course, Doug Jones got a huge boost in organic Twitter followers. And, the Kremlin authorities obviously saw that and got nervous and pumped a bunch of Russian bots his way to support Roy Moore, to get Roy Moore to catch up in his Twitter following to Doug Jones.
Wow. I'm still, you've stumped me. I'm still thinking of a Gorka Bannon love child.
That is Roy Moore. Yeah.
That is an ugly, ugly, ugly scenario. That is an ugly child. And I don't say that lightly.
Yeah. That's what we're up against in Alabama if Doug Jones doesn't win. And that's exactly what the Kremlin wants. They want somebody that's that hideous, so essentially Roy Moore is a chaos agent like Bannon. Roy Moore is authoritarian like Bannon, and especially like Gorka. Gorka was just giving a speech at this, far-right conservative. It was a conservative convention, but let's face it, the conservatives in America now, the movement is full-blown nationalist far-right, and so Gorka was on record at this convention, giving a speech, saying how people on the left, liberals, have no idea what we can do to them privately, how we could essentially destroy them privately. And that is like, a brown shirt threat. That is like the private militias of zealot volunteers that sprung up that were pushing Hitler in his early months of being in power. That sort of rhetoric, and that's just that's a massive threat. Like what he's saying on stage at a so-called conservative convention. That's a Hitler rally, that kind of rhetoric. And Sebastian Gorka, who's, little mini wannabe Hitler, he's pushing this Roy Moore candidate. And we should be absolutely terrified of Roy Moore actually getting into the Senate, where he's going to, saying outrageous things, trying to propose and push outrageous legislation and back Trump's far-right agenda. And it's going to be like having it's going to be like a little piece of Trump in the Senate doing like Trump's chaos.
Yeah, I look at Moore as someone who's even crazier than Trump, because I don't know that Trump is a theocrat. I believe Moore completely is. And that scares me even more than the insanity coming out of Trump.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, so you see this theocracy, that Trump is sort of catering to because he loves his base. He loves anybody who's loyal to him. Doesn't matter if they've broken the law. Ivanka is the same way, as we know. She's just a prettier, packaged up version of her father. And I point that out because there was this really interesting deep dive look at Vice President Mike Pence in the New Yorker by Jane Mayer. And what they revealed is that when the transition team came in, and Ivanka, in front of everyone, basically bestowed on Mike Flynn, in exchange for the loyalty he showed her father. She basically said, what do you want to do in the White House, Mike? You were so loyal to my father. And that's how the Trumps work. It's like sort of like that mafia level of loyalty.
Yeah. No, and look, I kind of understand it. I kind of understand their thinking. But again, it's another one of those things where it's not how government works. Because look how well Flynn worked out. And you look at with Marino right now. Look how well Marino's worked out. As inept as these people are, they're still dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. But the Trumps value loyalty upon all else. And as long as the evangelical movement, as long as the theocrats, the anti-gay, the pro-subjugation of women, as long as that movement is totally behind Trump and they see Trump as their puppet, as their tool to push their theocracy, to make America essentially a Christian Sharia law state, the more they see their opportunity in Trump, the more loyal they'll be to him.
Yep.
And the more loyal the Trumps will be to the evangelicals. It's very hard right.
I've taken a lot of guff from people, and it's been, at least a year and a half now. I've been saying, you've got people like Pence, you've got people like Moore, you've got all of these theocrats who want to bring that Sharia law here, and a Christian version. And I've been saying for a couple of years that there are those forces that want to make us a Christian version of like Iran, and I got stuff. No, we're much better than that. No, we're not. And people like Moore and Pence show us that we're not. Look at the article that you cited. In there you got Trump, joking that Pence wants to hang all the gay people. That's not a joke.
Yeah,
I think it's real.
About it. Yeah, it's exactly right. It's exactly right. They would strip, gay, lesbian, trans Americans of their rights overnight if they thought they could get away with it.
So was this in an episode of House of Cards? Because I understand that the Russian hackers were forced to watch House of Cards to learn how to, get involved in our system. Because look, you want to tear us up, throw religion into the mix, throw a bunch of, race hatred into the mix. That'll tear this country right apart.
Yeah, it's true that what the Russians needed to execute an impactful strategy, as they did in 2016, to help Trump win. A lot of the research they took advantage of was publicly available. Like studying our culture, pop culture, like House of Cards, how Americans speak. What culture we consume, like all that. That's information that's valuable for them to sort of to teach their social media bot army how to communicate with us, how to influence us, what sort of blog posts to flood the internet with, what sort of comments to flood the comment section with on, articles about Russia and Putin and Trump, etc. So it's all a big information war on many, many levels. But one thing that has to be pointed out is the Russians needed serious help and coaching when it came to the level of targeting that they used in their Facebook and Twitter ads, targeting voters.
Right. So that's how they knew how they knew how to create Melvin Reddick here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Exactly right. And I'm telling you, no level of, Russian spies and diplomats, who are also Russian spies really technically inside Russia, like no level of Russian Kremlin employees could have just gotten that information on their own, no matter how smart they are, no matter how good they are. And I assure you of that. I'm somebody that works with a lot of different cultures, a lot of different countries. In my work, I travel quite a bit. And even London, even like going to London, where we have a special relationship with the UK, right, us Americans, even in London, I'm constantly explaining to, colleagues in London, friends in London, what's going on in America, pointing out, stories that they often miss, really big stories for us. So not all of the news, not all of the information necessarily translates across the pond in a way that, cultures are all different.
Right.
Our frame of references are all different. So they really needed experts on the inside, like a Paul Manafort, who comes from the campaigning world, who had a track record of winning elections for the GOP. They needed somebody like a Paul Manafort to help them do the targeting on Facebook and Twitter. That's just so obvious because that is a science and that is a major industry that campaigns pay a lot of money for experts to coach them through that.
Yeah, and this
the
is
Russians could not have done that on their own.
Yeah, and this is where that Cambridge Analytica comes up, where possibly Junior and Jared were possibly involved, right?
Possibly. I mean, those guys are idiots. They do things out in the open. They live above the rules. I mean, Jared should have his security clearance stripped for multiple reasons. Leaving information off of his security forms, including meetings with the Kremlin representatives. So that sort of Keystone Cop shenanigans coming out of Junior and Jared, those guys, I'm sure played a hand in it. I'm sure there's emails and tap phone calls showing that they played a hand in it. I'm sure Mueller is sitting on that. Why else would he be really pushing them for testimony, pushing them to come in, staying on them very, aggressively. So, there's no doubt that in their excitement to win this election and defeat Hillary Clinton, the most qualified candidate for president we've ever had, and that's quoting, people like President Obama. They had to do something. They had to cheat to win.
Yeah, and look, these are people who believe. Yeah, these are people who believe win at any cost. So it's not surprising to me. And look, I look at someone like Jared. You can argue however you want. If you can't fill out the form, you shouldn't be allowed to have classified information. I think there's a minimum requirement that if you can't simply fill out the form, and from what I understand, you have a team of lawyers to help you with. If you can't do that minimum little thing, I don't know that I want you having all of our access to all of our state secrets. It's just kind of one of those things that I kind of believe.
Right, filling out the form is a test of itself.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't simply do that. So let me ask you and go back to this, because with Roy Moore, I mean, it's a Senate race. Yeah, why would the Russians, why jump in the middle of this? I mean, the polling numbers that I've seen have more up by 8. And look, Alabama's a crazy state, so it seems reasonably safe to say it's probably going to go Moore's way. Why would you throw yourself in the middle of all of this, knowing that there's already all this heat on you already?
Well, that's part of how the Kremlin under Putin operates. It's very brazen. At the same time that it was hosting the Olympics, for instance, they had reports of Russian military helping, attack and shoot at protesters on the square in Kiev. So at the same time Putin was hosting the Olympics, right after the Olympics, then Putin just had the Olympics in Russia, played host to the whole world, and as soon as it was over, he invades Crimea. He takes Crimea, and he calls it a referendum. So you had people being killed, kidnapped, tortured. You had media shut down. You had government buildings shut down. And he calls it a referendum and denies that the little green men wearing military uniforms that popped up are his Russian soldiers. So he's just a brazen liar, and he's a brazen mass murderer, and he does things like this out in the open, and he's a track record of doing this. And so for him to now be for Putin's Kremlin to now be meddling in a in Alabama, not Russia, in an Alabama Senate race, in front of the whole world to see, while Russiagate is like one of the number one stories in the world right now, and certainly an obsession of the president himself. That's just the way Putin's Kremlin operates. They don't care that they're going to deny it no matter what. It's just sheer brazenness. Yeah,
especially because yesterday during the impromptu press conference, the president said, Trump said, there's nothing there. It's a non-story. So last question I've got for you, because look, as you've pointed out, the Russians are, Putin's very brazen, going to do this stuff for the people of Alabama. What advice do we give? Because look, I guess Germany's figured this out. They didn't get their last election stolen because the consumers were a little more judicious of what was coming out. Any advice for people?
I mean, it's really hard because you have conservatives in America who now, like Putin because he helped defeat Hillary and help get their guy elected president. So it's hard. But I would say, the one thing Americans, especially on the state level, especially in the South, have is state sovereignty. So if you have a foreign power that's, invading your election, doing things to influence voters, and doing that, in a nefarious way, trying to trick people into not thinking it's them in a very sort of like the cat ate the canary kind of way. But yeah, no, I think it's just a matter of Southern voters have to take pride in their in sort of not letting a hostile regime get into their election. I think it's just a matter of sovereignty. It's a matter of independence, and they should just figure this out for themselves as as citizens, as residents of Alabama.
Most certainly going to be interesting as we move to the December 12th special election deadline. I know it's a race that I'm watching closely, and it'll be interesting to see how this little dynamic jumps into the middle of it. Andrea, I appreciate you taking some time and filling us in on this.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Always great talking with you, our good friend Andrea Chalupa. Again, it's one of those things, just kind of amazing in my view that it happens like this. Just absolutely mind blowing. And again, you come back to this moment where you go, at some level, we have to be a little more judicious in how we use information. I mean, I saw the story with Roy Moore, and I'm going, wow, could have been just some kid who decided I'm going to throw the $100 in and and give Roy Moore an extra bump. And look, none of because you can go online right now and you can buy 1,000 or 10,000 Twitter followers for $5. Now, they're not actual followers. These Russian bots, there are a number of areas where they just create accounts and they put up fake pictures, and you've got one person following them and they're following 1,000 people. And what it is it's just to pump up your numbers and make you look like, oh, you've got a lot of Twitter followers, when actually it's about community. It's about, this is the thing about Twitter or Facebook or any of these social media things. You have to be engaged. You have to be, talking to people, and you have to be putting out content and having that feedback. I mean, that's one of the things that I like about it. And to say, I've got 100,000 followers, but nobody ever retweets anything you write is a bit interesting. Now, honestly and truthfully, I'm not a huge fan of the instant feedback nature of, we have to have this self-adoration, in this Trump era. But look, simply put, at some point, we as a country have to figure out how we're going to deal with these attacks, because they're going to continue to happen. And I was reading an article not too long ago that pointed out that in Germany, they had this happen. You had all of these same kind of forces pushing this really far right Nazi kind of agenda in Germany. And, the people there were, no, because, I guess Merkel got reelected, right? But there was a huge push to get her out. And, they took a lot of it back to Putin and to these Russian hackers who did almost the exact same thing that they were able to do with Trump. Now, part of the argument was that, you don't have the same kind of forces in Germany that you have here in the U.S., who they're just hell-bent on. It doesn't matter what the policy, what the ideology, what all of this stuff is. It's about the outcome. We absolutely need to have we're going to win at any cost. And if we have to lie in bed with the devil, if we have to sleep with the devil, we're going to do it by goodness. And it's that win at any cost mentality that's kind of scary when you think about it. It really is. Just completely mind-blowing to me. And what we end up with is an administration who's just bonkers off the rocker. And it's one of those questions of when do we and how do we deal with what's clearly happening in front of us. And that becomes part of the whole question. How does this all play together? Because look, you look at the policy that's coming out of this White House, terrible, down the line. And nothing, in my view, more terrible than the tax plan that they're coming up with. And I was just reading again, this morning I woke up to my Twitter feed, and my email box filled with, the tax cuts are going to create jobs. That frame again. because you've got all of these conservative economists who are saying, no. What's going to happen is we're going to cut taxes on corporations, and then you're going to get pay increases. And every time I hear this, every time I hear one of these fantasies, every time they throw these myths at me, and this is the mastery of South Park. I think of the underpants gnomes. Collect underpants, profit. And there's nothing in the middle. We get underpants, collect underpants, profit. You go, okay, well, let's say you have all the underpants. How do you get to the profit? They never say. And it's the same thing here. Tax cuts, jobs and higher wages. And you go, okay, how? They come up with some, mixed up, if we give them enough, eventually something falls off the table and you mice can, you can scurry over the crumbs, sometimes maybe, or they'll invest in new plants and they'll invest in new infrastructure. They'll take that money and they'll invest it in creating jobs. And you go, okay, when's that happen? Exactly, never. And you go, but it's the ideology. It has to work. We have to know it's going to work, right? Wrong. So when you hear Trump go, we're not cutting taxes on the rich people, you go, of course you are. That's how the job creation engine is supposed to work. If everything we've been told for the last 30, 40 years is true, that we give rich people more, and they're the smart people, they're the really bright ones, they're the job creators, they're the producers, they're wonderful, they're tremendous, they're lovely, we love them, and we have to give them more. And eventually, out of their benevolence, out of the goodness of their heart, out of being wonderful human beings who care about their fellow man, they will then bestow upon us the wonders of employment and high wages, with health care and pensions and sick days and family leave and all those wonderful things that our employers just give to us because they care. I mean, stop and think about. And I don't know if you can tell that there's some sarcasm. I don't know if you can tell I'm being facetious in a way that, is really kind of thick. But that's what we're told to believe, that there are these benevolent folks who give us these things. When the reality is nothing is ever given. You always fight for things. You always have to take things. And the working class of this country didn't get a prosperous middle class because they begged. Because you go back to the 1880s, 1890s, into the 20s, people begged a lot. They didn't get a lot, but they begged a lot. It wasn't until they organized and said, we demand, and we're going to shut things down unless we get what we demand. I mean, it's really quite remarkable to me that we still buy these frames that, look, they're telling us they're going to cut the corporate tax rate. They're going to cut it, all the way down from 35. I guess they're going down to 25. They're going to cut the pass-through rate. They're going to cut the top marginal tax rate. They're cutting all of these things that benefit rich people, and they're telling us, looking us right in the eye, and saying, this isn't going to cut taxes for the wealthy. You go, well, explain to me how it isn't. You're cutting all of those tax rates. Explain. No, you're cutting their taxes. Yeah, but it's going to mean more jobs. How? Well, underpants, profit. At some point, do we not just wake up as a society and go, what are you talking about? What was the George Bush thing? If fool me once, can't get fooled again. We keep getting fooled over and over and over again on this front. And look, there's the Council of Economic Advisors. They put out a report recently that said by reducing the corporate tax rate to 20%, it would increase household income by $4,000 a year. And you go, explain to me how that's possible. Again, underpants profit. Cut the corporate tax rate down to 20% from 35. Slash. How do workers then get that? Explain to me the process by which cutting taxes on corporations equates to higher wages for anyone other than shareholders, other than CEOs, other than executives. Explain to me how that filters down. Because here's the thing. They're also in the tax plan, another one of those little things that they're throwing out there is one of the things that they do is we're going to accelerate the pace at which you can deduct appreciation. So buying new material, buying new equipment. So we're going to push through buying new equipment, which means, wait for it, which means we're going to accelerate the payment of automation and job-killing machinery. That's coming. And we're going to pay for it through lower taxes for businesses and the very wealthy. I mean, it's really just quite remarkable that this is even remotely discussed. And then you throw into this, yesterday you got Trump railing on about, Obamacare's dead. It's dead. We shouldn't even talk about it anymore. And you go, other countries have really figured this stuff out. Really, they have. We're the dumb ones. We're the ones who are still bickering over, whether people should get insurance at all. And who's worthy. Look, we're all worthy. It's just mind-blowing to me. And here to talk about his experience. He was in France. Our good friend Frank Emspeck, executive director there at the Workers Independent News. He had an interesting experience while in France covering the worker uprising there. Frank, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, how are you this morning? Beautiful day out here in the Midwest, anyway.
Well, good stuff there. I hear good news about the run in the 1st Congressional District there in Wisconsin. Hopefully some good stuff come next November.
Well, I hope so. We interviewed Randy on Win today, or discussed it with his campaign. He did very, very well in terms of fundraising, mostly because he got about 25,000 small donors. This is extraordinarily important.
Yep.
And it actually beat out Ryan this quarter, so we'll see what happens next year.
Yeah, so let me ask you this. I mean, you were in France covering the worker uprising there. You got sick, right?
Yeah, well, I got a cold, like everybody else who flies on the plane, you're there. And so I got a cold, and then I got another one, and it was getting worse. So what to do? Here we are. So we called what amounts to urgent care. They call it SOS Médecin, in French, right? So we get them on the line, and my wife speaks pretty well, and I can, comprehend. And they said, okay, we'll take care of this. Don't worry about it, and we'll send somebody over to see you. So we didn't understand that. We could not comprehend this, no matter what language we were speaking. And finally, we said, okay, well, we'll be at the urgent care center in 20 minutes, 40 minutes. And they said, no, you don't understand. You're not supposed to travel. You got a cold, right? Oh, yeah. So stay home. That's the idea here. And so we'll send somebody. And I thought, in about 6 months we might see somebody, right? Well, 45 minutes later, a knock on the door. And this doctor is there, and she says, are you Frank Emspeck? I said, yeah. She says, oh, good. Okay, and walks in. I'm now stunned. I haven't had a house call for a doctor, since I was about 6. So, nor has anybody else in this country that by and large. So she does a complete exam, and their theory is this, that when people are sick, the doctor should come to them because the idea is to serve the patient, not to serve the insurance company or the profit-making institutions of one sort or another.
Or to have you walking around getting people sick on the subway or wherever you go as well.
That's what she said. She said in the flu season, we insist that people stay home. Absolutely insist, because otherwise all they're doing is making everything worse. So, she gave me a prescription and did a complete examination and so on and so forth. Took about maybe 25 minutes. And so now the bill, I'm thinking, oh, my God, hundreds of dollars, right?
Now you're going to really be sick.
Yeah, now I'd really be sick. Well, it was $92. And
wow.
As my wife said, because she's an obstetrician, practices here in Wisconsin, she said the co-pays that most of the patients pay to see them at the University of Wisconsin, a public institution, incidentally, is just about equal. The co-pay is about equal to this home visit.
Wow.
And this is what's so amazing. And the whole concept is different. This is what really struck me, and we talked about it with her for a while. Their theory is that the medicine exists to serve the patient, not to make money, but to serve the patient. And how do they do this? A big city, several million people. and this was a Saturday, I think, they had people around the city, about 30 or 40 physicians on call around the city. They have a little car that says, doctor on it. And they go off whenever there's a call to this medical center. They send them around. And they said, we could see hundreds of people this way, more than if people came to the center. Because there's less bureaucracy, there's less fooling around, and they can park on the sidewalk. And she said, nobody's going to bother us. You're not going to get a ticket, And so this worked. So maybe 30 minutes later, she shows up. 20 minutes after that, we're done. And then we get a prescription. I'm thinking, here we go again, right? Well, unlike the United States, where the Congress has said the government cannot try to get lower price, cannot have the drug companies.
Yeah, we're better than that. We pay full price, Frank.
That's right. We pay full price, especially because most of the money goes for advertising.
Damn proud of it.
In any event, the prescriptions costs were probably 30% of what they cost here, maybe 20%. That's what's so amazing. And I think that we do not understand this. On Monday, CNN here, they're having this big debate about insurance, and going on and on about competition and whatnot. When you're sick, you don't call up and say, I want the worst doctor because I got the lowest price. You want the best medical care possible.
Yeah.
There is no competition as far as the patient is concerned.
Yep. No, I've said 100 times, if I'm laying on the ground having a heart attack, I'm not speed dialing the 3 local hospitals to find out who has a coupon that day.
That's right. That's right. And I think that we don't understand this. We do not see this after 50 years of propaganda here saying that we're the best, we're the best, we're the best. Well, we are the most expensive, and we do have poorer and poorer outcomes in specialty after specialty across the spectrum compared to other countries. And we're spending more and more of our money, not for care, but for insurance.
Yep.
I don't think it's not clear to me that people understand this, because in any practice, a medical practice, you have 2 or 3 people whose job it is to worry about the insurance payments. Those are 3 salaries, and it's an incredible waste. It's just.
I'm right there with you. No, I mean,
absolutely incredible.
Which is why I think Trump, this executive order that he's pushed through is kind of masterful in that he's choosing to to go after the insurance companies, and with the rhetoric, we're not going to bail these insurance companies out. It plays where for people who don't really understand that
That's
what he's
right.
actually doing is causing chaos. But
not only chaos, millions of people are not going to be able to afford insurance. The insurance companies are not willing to take a hit in their profits, clearly, right? And increasingly, the only solution that's going to make sense is a single-payer thing, just like Social Security is a single-payer,
Yep.
with the lowest possible administrative cost, 2%, and, good service. Most people are happy when they talk to the Social Security Administration. Why not? Their job is to pay you. And in France, their theory is the job of the doctors in the hospitals is to service you. That's a thought, right?
Yeah. Well, let me
And
ask you
it's
the other.
that kind of thing that we have to really, whack away at here, I think.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you the other side of this, because then it comes down to the doctors. We're told that the doctors get into it because they make big money. We need millionaire doctors. What's the compensation like in places like Germany, in places like France, in places like the UK, where they do this, where people get care, even foreigners like who come?
There's several aspects to this, okay? The first is the question of insurance, right? For a doctor in OB on the East Coast, the insurance bill to start with, you open the door, and the first thing is $120,000 for malpractice insurance, all right? So they're not getting paid the first 120, right? The second, that's a lot of money. The second thing that happens is medical education is practically free in most of the parts of the world, and
Which it should be.
So the doctor graduates, first of all, not owing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and secondly, in a situation where he or she can choose the kind of part of the profession that's really helpful, say like internal medicine, okay? And so you have both a filling of the demand properly and a non-bankruptcy problem. The doctors don't have to worry about that. So if they're not having to pay a fortune in medical insurance, and they're not having to pay a fortune for interest and everything else, then their salary, the actual cash dispersed by the government, right, can be less, and still the doctors will enjoy a high standard of living, which they do. They're not working for nothing, but they're not working for millions either, and the cost structure is completely different. Their commitment when you finish medical school is to give some back, in public service. Why not? They've just paid for you. And most people say, yeah, that's a good idea. Why not? And so three things are happening here. The right parts of the profession are being staffed properly. People are not in debt and driven by money, which is good because then they spend more time with the patient, right? You get increased care. And thirdly, the overall costs are less. So this is the system. They're not all the same, in Germany and Switzerland and France. They have different tweaks, but fundamentally, they're going into this saying medical help, medicine, doctors, health is a human right, and they're structuring their system to meet that human right, not to meet the profit needs of the insurance companies.
Any hope here? I mean, honestly, any hope here, do you think? I mean, because your experience...
This is hope. I think Reverend Barber put it pretty well, both on our show today and elsewhere over the weekend. This is a moral issue. We are on the side of the angels here. We have to make this moral case that as human beings, health care is a right, and the system needs to be structured that way. And more people are saying, wait a minute. There's an article in the Times today about this conservative area in Arkansas, and all of a sudden they realize that Trump's programs may endanger the major source of employment, which is the hospital. Oh my God, boom. And so people are saying, wait a minute, we didn't buy into this here, and people did not. There is absolutely no reason at this stage of the game, technically or organizationally or financially, for a profit-based healthcare system to function in this country. It will not work, and it is increasingly not working, and more people are seeing it. Not enough yet, but more and more, I think, are saying, uh-oh, why are we paying this guy?
Yeah.
What are we paying for in drugs? Wait a second. They say it's for research. I thought the National Institute, paid for this drug. Oh, wait a minute. They're spending more on advertising than they are on research? Why am I doing this? And I believe that kind of idea is beginning to catch on.
Yeah, I mean, at some point,
you saw it with the Sanders campaign. I mean, all of a sudden, he comes out with what amounts to a single-payer position, and hundreds of thousands of people who never heard of this guy are voting for him. And now, about a significant number, not all yet, of the Democratic Party leadership is saying, gee, maybe we should have thought of this and really run with the ball here. And we'll see. I mean, there's challenges within the Democratic Party now to some of the leadership, and one of the key issues is single payer. And are we going to move in a serious direction, not keep screwing around trying to save the insurance companies?
Now, I'm right there with you. I mean, at some point, the hope is that we...
that's you said Trump was masterful with this. I'll tell you, one thing that may happen here. Now, who knows? We're not hired by the Democrats to give them political strategy. But the fact of the matter is, if he says to the Congress, you fix it, you pay the insurance companies, I don't want to pay the insurance companies, there's no reason why the Democrats should fall into that trap.
No, I'm right there with you. But I'm saying he's masterful. He's actually chosen the rhetoric and some frames that people who aren't really paying attention to what this is going to do can grab onto. Look, everybody hates the insurance companies.
That's right.
Everyone thinks
That's
they're
right.
greedy. Everyone thinks it doesn't want government bailing things out. So when he uses, we're bailing these insurance companies out without really understanding that it's the basis of making sure that people get access to insurance that's somewhat affordable, and that it's eventually just going to raise everyone's premiums and cost people out of the market and make these insurers pull out of other areas, causing a demise. Then that's a lot longer discussion than it's just greedy insurance companies we're bailing out.
Yeah, well, I think the crisis is here. So it's hard to say. We need that clarion call from the Democrats or from anybody, actually, who says this system is finished. We cannot function as a society with 1/6 of our money going basically to pay insurance companies. And the hospitals are being cut here. They're being squeezed. The doctors are being squeezed. One reason, you go to the doctor instead of the doctor coming to you is so that he or she can maximize that. Every single doctor that I know in this massive system here in the University of Wisconsin and the associated operations, is on piecework for all practical purposes. Although they hate it when I say it in public. But, You have 12 minutes to see a patient, 13 minutes to see a patient. What happens if they have a complicated issue? What happens if there's a personal thing? If you think about obstetrics and gynecology, this isn't something you can do, oh, yeah, don't worry about it, You need to talk to the patient. You need to have a relationship so that he or she, obviously in this case, will open up and say, well, this is what's going on, and I need some assistance here. You can't necessarily do that in 9 or 10 minutes while you're looking at the computer to type in all the information because they've already fired your administrative assistant. We used to do that.
Yeah.
And so, it's increasingly a system where people are upset and ill-served. And what the trick here, I think, is for people like Bernie, but Elizabeth Warren or whoever else, to get up and say, the emperor has no clothes. I'm going to go down with the ship and fight for every American to have the kind of health care they deserve. And the insurance companies should go overboard with the system. And I think somebody has to say that. If not, we're not only serving a generation, we got other huge problems that are medical problems, like opioid, right? That's not something like that. Where'd that come from? It was easier to give people pain medication than talk to them. So they did. And now what? You have people throughout the United States, not just black people. You see, it's white people now being affected. And, we got a crisis. But it's a crisis driven by a profit-driven system. And I think that we just have to say that, and I hope that the political leadership is there to give voice to this.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right, Frank. At some point, we've got to wake up to the reality that we don't have the best system and that there are other ways of doing this. And your experience in France, and I've heard that, people who've traveled to other countries, that, it's the same way. I mean, in fact, I've heard, people, and I think you've even told me, that the doctor was apologetic. Look, sorry, we have to charge you this.
Oh yeah, she didn't. She said under the French system, if we were covered by the French system, they would have charged a couple of dollars. It's basically an accounting system to make sure that the person showed up and got service. I mean, it's like the university in Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic now, which is not wealthy, okay, compared to the United States. The huge fight there many years ago when the government changed and it became a capitalist country was the university. Well, the university was free. Higher education was free under the Reds in Czechoslovakia. And so now what? Well, a lot of the people who were in favor of capitalism said, wait a minute, whoa, we didn't mean capitalism meant that, wait a second here. And so after a huge fight, they finally agreed, at least in the first few years of the administration, to charge $5 as opposed to nothing.
Yeah.
All right, now think about that. All right, we are indebting a generation. We're not helping people. It's a weight on the economy. Every single social indicator is on red here, and people say, well, I don't know, but it is true. We have to step up. The labor movement has to step up. I hope at this convention coming up in another week, I guess, we will hear the kind of clarion call to American workers that will get through the fog and say, here is our objective. We're going to fight for this for all workers. This is the 2 or 3 things we're going to go for. And, put all the cards on the table, because I think that's where we are as a country.
I'm looking forward to the convention. I hope to see you there. Frank, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you, and thanks for sharing your story.
Have a good day, and good luck to you. We'll see you in St. Louis.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Frank Emspecht, executive producer there at Workers Independent News. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
With corporations socking away massive profits and with the labor market fairly tight, why are workers' wages still stuck at miserly and even poverty levels? One big reason is that corporate leaders have their heads stuck in a dreamy future. They actually are spending wildly on workers, just not human workers. While few Americans are aware of it, bosses are quietly investing in hordes of autonomous robots powered by a cognitive technology called artificial intelligence. Instead of paying a decent wage to you, corporations are buying millions of these cheap, human-esque thinking machines in order to take a shocking number of jobs from you. Accountants, bank loan officers, financial analysts, all of these numbers jobs are already falling to bots that can calculate much faster and more accurately than people. Journalism? Associated Press now uses artificial intelligence machines to write thousands of financial articles and sports reports. And Forbes magazine uses an AI system named Quill to pen articles. Skilled labor? Meet Sam, a robotic bricklayer that lays 3 times as many bricks in a day as humans can, displacing the jobs of 3 people. Farmers? The first robot farm is opening in Japan, with automatons transplanting, watering, and harvesting their crop. There's also a shepherd robot that can run an entire livestock farm. Also, the jobs of librarians, pharmacists, lawyers, air traffic controllers, doctors, teachers, hospital administrators, bartenders, and so many more are targeted for massive displacement. In just the next 5 years, 6% of all U.S. jobs are expected to be roboticized. This is Jim Hightower saying, why aren't our political leaders and mass media alerting the people to the job-apocalypse that's about to hit us?
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. It's one of those things. You kind of look at the healthcare system for what it is, and it's really quite remarkable that we've, all these years, allowed this to really continue. That we've allowed this to, it's crazy to me that we've allowed this system to go on for so long and not really push back on it. Just crazy stuff. And, you hear stories like that from Frank of, being in another country and imagine, you go into somewhere else and you don't have their insurance. You get sick. What happens to you? They could easily hold him hostage. They could easily just rake him completely over the coals. It's just, it's just amazing stuff to me. Just is what it is what it is. Anyway, interesting story coming out of Georgia. Again, you got to love the gun nuts. The gun nuts in full force in Georgia. Evidently, a gubernatorial candidate, State Senator Michael Williams, he's not backing down. Not backing down because he loves his guns, man. Loves the guns. In fact, in light of the shooting in Las Vegas, he has said that, blaming guns or bump stocks for the actions of a lunatic is the same as blaming McDonald's for heart disease. And damn it, he's not taking it. He says an attack on bump stocks is an attack on the Second Amendment. And you go, I don't know, not buying that. I don't remember reading the Second Amendment where it said you have the right to bump stocks. And, I just had this conversation over the weekend where we were talking about, gun control. And, there are people going, we can't allow gun control. Gun control's bad. We can't allow it. And I go, we already have gun control. We have tons of it. No, we don't. Yeah, we do. And, the most extreme measure being, I can't have a nuclear weapon. I'd like one. Can't have one. I can't have a bazooka. I can't own a functional tank. There's a lot of stuff that we're not allowed to have. A lot of weapons, a lot of arms, not allowed to have. So already there's a line. Can't have it. Bump stocks are one of those things that say, you know what? Yeah, we understand automatic weapons are illegal, but hey, this gets you right there without being fully automatic. And you go, can we agree on nothing? Look, I'm not a gun grabber. As I've said a number of times, I've lived in both kind of areas where if you see somebody walking down a street, when I was a kid, you saw a guy walking down the street with a gun, somebody was going to die. They weren't walking around with their gun just for good health. I now live in a neighborhood where if you see somebody, with a gun, they're probably going to the free gun range down the road. And you hear gunshots all the time where I live. When I was a kid, if you heard gunshots, hit the floor. Don't go near the window. My kids don't have that. They hear gunshots all the time. In fact, they hear it so often they don't even hear it. My wife's shaking her head because it goes on so often, she doesn't even hear it. And yet, we have this mentality that, we have to stand in solidarity with gun owners across the nation because they're gonna take our bump stocks. It's crazy. I mean, it really is just quite nuts to me. And let's finish up with John McCain. John McCain was given the Liberty Medal last night. Given to him by Joe Biden. And look, I look at those two guys as, an era gone by. They've been in the Senate. They were in the Senate, 30 years, where there was actually some statesmanship that went on in the Senate. There was actually some bit of concern about the policies and the rhetoric and what society was going to have to deal with if nothing got done. But McCain gave an interesting speech where the transcript, I thought, pointed directly at Trump. He said, quote, "To fear the world we have organized and led for 3/4 of a century, to abandon the ideals we have advanced around the globe, to refuse the obligations of international leadership and our duty to remain the last best hope for the sake of some half-baked spurious nationalism cooked up by people who would rather find scapegoats than solve problems, is as unpatriotic as an attachment to any other tired dogma of the past that Americans consigned to the ash heap of history." He says, "We live in a land made of ideals, not blood and soil. We are the custodians of those ideals at home and their champions abroad. We have done great good in the world. That leadership has had its costs, but we have become incomparably powerful and wealthy as we did. We have a moral obligation," McCain says, to continue our just cause, and we would bring more than shame on ourselves if we don't. We will not thrive in a world where our leadership and ideals are absent. We wouldn't deserve to. I would argue pointed directly at Trump and the fact that while simultaneously saying that we can't be involved in international affairs and breaking things up, he is causing much chaos. And the unfortunate reality is if you look at the rest of the world and the Iran deal being front and center amongst it, the rest of the world is saying, Donald, don't. And Donald is saying, nope, Donald, do. Something wrong. And again, it's going to come back to us. It's going to come back to you. It's going to come back to me. It's going to come back to us to stand up and step forward. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's color.